The TCG Design Theory podcast is part of the Booster Pack Network. For more TCG-related content, visit theboosterpacknetwork.com. Hosting for this show is sponsored by Category 1 Games, the go-to shop for all of your classic TCG needs. Find your favorites or discover something new at category1games.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to the TCG Design Theory podcast. I'm Jay, and today I have Tanner McBride. He is the creator of the Kryptik TCG, and I'm very excited to talk to him today about combat mechanics in trading card games and how you can design your combat mechanics better to suit your game. So, Tanner, welcome to the show.
What's up, my friend? Glad to be here. This is awesome.
Glad to have you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the trading card game space, and especially how you got into trading card game design?
For sure. So my name's Tanner. Of course, I'm from Las Vegas. I've been playing Magic since I was about 9-10 years old. It's funny, my stepbrother's stepdad actually introduced us to it with one of those 10,000 count card holders with a bunch of ABU era Magic cards and just let us build decks. So I've been playing games for many, many years, and we would identify problems with our favorite games and fix them with our own rules. So really, we've been designing games since we were children. And mainly the aspects that we would design was taking RNG out of games. So we would implement our own land systems. For example, in Magic, we did a main deck and a land deck, and we played like Hearthstone. So I've been really designing games since I was a kid and making up my own rules for everything. I'm just a gamer. I love to play new games. So I was actually developing a comic series for Cryptic, and I had the lore set up, and I was starting to script out the comics and build out the world and the story. And I started to learn more about the indie TCG space, and I've always wanted to create my own game. I just didn't think it was possible. So I'm a business owner in Vegas. I own a powerlifting gym here. We sell wrist wraps, knee wraps, all equipment and stuff. So I had the business experience. I just didn't think it was a viable business model until I learned it was. So I learned about the Kickstarter model. I started to implement some of the ideas I had for game design into a game that had to do with Cryptic. And then I started commissioning art, making cards, thinking, maybe we'll sell a couple hundred boxes on Kickstarter, raise 10 grand. It'll be a cool little project for me. And then it just took on a life of its own because of the community. Like, I had a hardcore community of 50 to 100 people in the first month, and they were pushing me like, no, this is a real thing. You have something here. So I just kept pushing it, hired 2 developers, and then we just let it rip, man. That's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. And so you say, you mentioned you designed games as a kid, and you have a little bit of experience with that. But this game started off as you doing the world building for Cryptic,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of becoming interested in the possibility of it becoming a trading card game. So you would say this very much was a lore first, game second kind of project.
It was. And I guess technically it was not, just because the game design had already existed in my mind and a little bit on paper prior to that, just because of the games that we had designed when we were younger. So really the game design did exist first, but as they came together as like a cohesive unit, it was lore first and then game for sure.
Gotcha. And so go into Cryptic a little bit. What is the basic story behind Cryptic? Tell us a little bit about what the trading card aims to do and aims to give to players.
For sure. So story-wise, essentially just quick rundown is that there's these they're called the Overseers. They're these cloaked figures, and there's factions, and they exist on different worlds. They have their own native lands, and the Overseers can go to their worlds and pluck them from their lands and take sections of their world and put it onto Cryptic Island. So it's like a big world quilt. It's essentially a crucible. So the citizens of different factions all either work together or enemies, however it plays out, and they have 66 years to live. And on the 66th year, at the end of it, they face judgment. They either ascend into Overseer status or they just stay dead, because that's time's up, basically. You don't age on the island, and there's no set way to ascend into Overseer status. It could be by being the greatest warrior. It could be by being the greatest peacekeeper, the greatest artist. They don't really know. So they're really just urged to just live their lives and do their thing and kind of see how it plays out. And we definitely put that into our game design. The game design is very thematic. Like, there's 6 shields. We call them 11-year cards. Each represent an 11-year block of your life, because on the island, every 11 years, there's a judgment trial held. And you're basically a citizen yourself, and you're not an overseer when you play. You're a citizen. And all the citizens you're using to defeat your opponent and have them face judgment is actually your allies. So the game is very thematic. We do a lot of 6s and 11s and like try to keep it flavorful. But in general, like the whole idea of Cryptic and the gameplay itself is it's my ideal game. And really, I think that people are finding that it's also theirs because it's simple enough to learn. It uses familiar turn phases and familiar terms whenever possible. And then the other terms used, like keywords, are obvious. I designed them in a way that people would understand what they meant just by reading the word. If you've played other games before, it's extremely easy to pick up. And if you haven't played other games before, it's still relatively easy to pick up. I can teach my game. And the whole idea is that you don't need tokens, you don't need dice, you just need your cards. It's an immaculate design. So all you need are your cards. It's relatively simple to learn. But from a competitive perspective, it can get very complex. You have advanced board states and you get into combat, which is what we'll be talking about today. That's where the top players shine, and that allows the game to have a competitive side. So it really does satisfy all ends. Like collectors love it because they love the art, they love the lore. Players love it because it's easy enough to pick up, but if they want to take it serious, there is a competitive avenue for them. So it was just trying to be like an all-encompassing design. I think we did a pretty good job with it. People are loving it. So
Yeah. Something that touches on everything, but keeping the simplicity of design, like you said, no tokens, no dice, I think speaks to a lot of people, because a lot of projects you see nowadays, it kind of seems like you need a game mat or you need a starter set to get your components and things like that. So definitely appeals to people who like more simplicity. But a big thing that I've seen from time to time people talk about is combat or conflict of some sort between you and another player or players in a trading card game even necessary. That doesn't necessarily have to be battle or fighting, but in your opinion, obviously you have combat in your game, but from a very general perspective, is combat necessary in card games?
I don't think so, honestly. I think I chose that path because it's something that I enjoy and it's something that was familiar to me. And it just feels very natural to use my game pieces to defeat your game pieces. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for interesting game design that would be more like, I don't want to give away all my good stuff, but that would basically essentially be like a race to solving a puzzle or a race to getting to the end result of something, whether it be get this many pieces assembled and then figure out the riddle or whatever it would be, where you could create a game that wouldn't require you to beat down your opponent. It would be a race. It would basically be a challenge of intellect. And I think that's actually a really interesting way to design a game. Not the route we went, of course. I think it's something we could implement in some cards in the future, but I think that would actually be a very cool, like all-in-one game. I mean, don't steal my ideas, guys, but I think it would just be cool to basically have a game where it was like me versus you, and you can interact with me. Like, say, for example, you could take clues from me. I can take clues from you. I can give you a clue and I get a clue, like an equal level thing. So I think there's a lot of interesting ways to do that. But besides combat, it would have to be something that was just working towards a goal that declared you the winner of the game and your opponent being able to interact with your path to that goal. Interaction is the key. That's the whole name of the game. So for our game, everything's instant speed, and we use the effect pile, which is basically the stack. And that is one thing that Magic does that's awesome, is the stack and priority. Those two things make games fun. Being able to interact with my opponent, that was one of the downfalls of Duel Masters, is like the interaction was pretty minimal. It was kind of an I go, you go type of game. And when the shields were broken, there really wasn't a lot of action there. Some had shield triggers, some cards did not. In our game, they either have costs or abilities that they can be used when they're destroyed as an 11-year card. So interaction is absolutely key. So whether it's through combat or some other method, it's fine as long as you can interact and it gets your brain working. That's really what it is you're getting those chemicals released in your brain off the satisfaction of figuring it out. There's something very satisfying about solving that problem. In our game, the problem is solving how do I kill my opponent? I got to solve that problem. But it could be any problem you're solving. But I guess essentially, I'm never really like said it that way, but you're solving a problem, which is very satisfying. Like human beings love to be given a task, and to complete that task with precision is just very fulfilling and satisfying. So
For sure.
and your brain is like, that's fun. That's what fun is, right? And especially nerds, like when you give them a task that's like really complex and they complete it, they're like, man, I'm a good nerd. And it gives you that endorphin of like, oh yeah. And that's why we love games. So
For sure. Yeah, and I know there's a lot of examples of PvE games, in the trading card game, not in the trading card game space necessarily, but kind of in the tabletop game space, where it's PvE, but it's still combat. Marvel Champions has it where, and a bunch of other games, obviously, where you're teaming up to fight to try and both win. But I think that kind of gets lost in trading card games because by its nature, you're trying to build a better deck. So if your deck is carrying someone else in a cooperative style, maybe some of that gets a little lost in the mix. But I definitely think conflict and combat, definitely play into that kind of thing. You versus the other player or players, I would say is probably essential.
Yeah. No, I prefer human interaction for sure. I mean, it's the same as like if you're playing a video game and you smoke an NPC, you're like, whatever. But if you smoke somebody online, you're like, let's go. Like it's a lot more fun.
Of
So
course.
not to sound crazy, but like killing real people is way more fun than killing digital or fake people. AI is like kind of boring to kill.
Listen to the old episode for context.
Yeah, exactly. You might have to bleep some of that. Oh yeah, what's the cursing policy? I didn't even ask before we hit record.
I don't have any, so we're
No,
good.
that's okay.
But so, talking about combat, talking about conflict, I know you've played a lot of games, not just trading card games, but tabletop games in general. What are some of your best examples that you can give? Maybe some examples that you drew off of for Cryptic that you would recommend for designers looking to create a very solid, robust combat system?
For me, combat, I mean, the key really is interaction and the ability to block and the ability to make decisions. So I think that we do combat great. I think that Magic does combat really well. Obviously, with Magic, there's 20,000 cards in the game, so it can get pretty complex and goofy. But as far as combat goes, just me saying I attack you, what are you going to do in response to that is great. Like uh, to bring up Duel Masters again, they had a mechanic called blocker, and it was like if your card doesn't have blocker, they can just attack you and kill you. And it's like, cool, I don't have anything that has blocker, so you just win. Like extremely lame. Nobody likes that. Like it's the opposite. It's basically like the equivalent of blocking, but for attacking would be like flying in Magic. Like, yeah, but I have flyers. I have things that can deal with your flyer. And that's another component of it is having other cards in your game. In the case of our game, they're called spell cards that are able to either neutralize or interact with those threats, reduce their power, remove them completely, make them blockable before you declare blockers. Like there's a lot of steps to that process that make it work. So when you're designing combat, just make sure that you keep in mind that no one enjoys just getting beat down with no way to defend themselves, right? Like that'd be like if you were just letting somebody just sock you in the face and you weren't allowed to freaking cover up. You know what I mean? Like that is a terrible feeling. So make it as interactive as possible. Definitely allow blocking. And like one thing we don't do in our game is we don't allow players to attack specific citizens. So like a unit or a creature, whatever you call it in your game. I've never really been a big fan of that. Like Magic doesn't do that. I just don't like the idea of being able to attack a specific creature or citizen. It just, for our game, it just didn't really work, but for yours it may. So I would just say as long as it's interactive and it's relatively easy to balance when you're designing cards, you're pretty much good to go.
Okay. And in your experience, have you seen any games that do have a targeting system, but maybe kind of add more of that interactability where it's not just, hey, it's my turn, then it's your turn, but hey, I'm going to choose an attacker and then you're going to choose an attacker and then I'm going to choose an attacker. Do you have any examples like that, or is that something you haven't really seen before?
That's not something I've never played a game like that. That's kind of like it's no one's turn type of thing where everyone can just kind of like those games do exist. I definitely don't play games like that. I haven't at least, but basically you're saying is like, I can attack, you can attack, and it's just like a back and forth, right? But then there's always got to be ultimately a way to deal with priority. Whose turn is it to do something? And that is something that Magic does really well and is described really, really well in their rule book. So for me, it's more about priority. As long as your priority system makes sense. And like if you are designing a game and you don't have priority specifically addressed in your rule book, you just need to do that immediately because no one likes a game where it's confusing who gets to do what first and how things resolve. Those are the two things that Magic does wonderfully, which is priority and the stack. So to me, as long as you incorporate both those things into your combat system, it's going to be fun and interactive. And I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later, like attack versus defense versus having one number and stuff like that. That's a huge factor as well. Just saying, like, my 1 cost is 1,000, your 2 cost is 2,000, I win. That is very lame. Like, no one likes that. That is boring. But yeah, I think that in general, as long as it's very interactive and there's an ability to defend myself, I'm having fun.
For sure. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of games that do the simplicity of whichever number, but that simplicity maybe plays into a more complex more complex systems in the game. But speaking on that, you know, people tend to think, okay, this is a trading card game. I attack you, you die, I win, right? Which is how a lot of games play, and they're fantastic games. But a lot of games tend to have different victory conditions or multiple victory conditions. So, can you go into a little bit about how having one condition or multiple conditions can affect the decisions you make in designing a combat system?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important. So if the main goal of the game is to reduce your opponent's life total to 0, like in our game, it's to reduce them to 0 by destroying their 6, 11 year cards and then hitting them one more time. So everything in our game combat related is leading to that goal. So you have to have cards that are proactive, cards that incentivize players to attack. Like with our short time mechanic, the more you beat down your opponent, your cards will actually get more powerful over time. Not to a level that just allows you to steamroll them, but a level that allows you to keep things even and fair. You have to have cards that lead to whatever win con you have, right? Like in our game, you can deck out, like you can go to draw and lose the game. It's not really a super common way to win in our game, but if you have cards that allow players to infinitely stall out, then players are going to lean into whatever wins them the game the most consistently. So give them an opportunity to play degenerate strategies like mill, and they absolutely will. So be very careful in game design and include those spikes and those degenerates in your design process, because if you're in it for the fun and you're like, yeah, I just attack and I just build things out and I have a great time attacking my opponent, and then a spike shows up and is like, well, this guy can just take it and chill, and I'll just wait till you run out of cards. Yeah, okay, that's not very fun. That's not very interactive. That's not what we're trying to do here. So you have to create cards that push the pace.
Mhm. And would you say it's easier to build a combat system around one victory condition, or as you toyed around with things, did you feel like maybe there was some room to do some interesting things with multiple win conditions? Maybe not running out of cards, but it's like, hey, you either destroy all my life points, or you destroy my champion. A lot of people do it differently. So, do you find that it's easier to do one or multiple?
Well, I think from a design perspective and from just like getting new players to play the game, it's much easier just to tell them this is how you win. Like if you have multiple ways to win, they're sitting there thinking like, oh yeah, I'm doing this, I'm working towards my goal, and then halfway working towards their goal, they're like, well, shit, should I do the other goal? That seems like a viable option as well. I don't really like that. So I think for new players and from a design perspective and like overall just fun of the game, it's much easier just to be racing to one goal. I mean, the decking thing is a thing just because it kind of has to be. There it gets a little bit weird if somebody runs out of cards and they don't automatically lose the game, and it creates a lot of situations where you have draws and stalemates and stuff like that, which for tournament play is absolute disaster. So I would say just have one. Like really, if you want to make it this super complex over the top thing, just you're probably just gonna have to accept that when you do tournament play, it's gonna be one of ones. You're not gonna be able to do best 2 of 3s when you give people the opportunity to do these long, drawn out, like wacky win conditions. It's just not gonna work. So and like that's another thing I would suggest if you're a game designer is go play in some tournaments of other games. Just go to Friday Night Magic. I mean, like go to any random tournament for any other game and like learn it, learn how the round systems work, learn how tiebreakers work, learn how pairings work. Like those are things that as a game designer, in my opinion, you should absolutely know. Like if you don't know how all that stuff works, it's going to be an uphill battle for you when you go to set up your organized play. Because store owners are going to be like, "Oh, how do we handle pairings?" And you're going to be like, "Who? What?" And that's just like that's not a good look. You know what I mean? So just that's stuff you want to learn and that you want to have down packed, and that will also influence your game design because you have to create a game that's proactive that people need to push the pace. And like in our second set, we were a little bit cautious in the first set in the way we designed the short time effects. In our second set, we're really going to push it. I really do want the meta to be people attacking and just playing the game, actually interacting, not stalling, not doing these like degenerate control strategies where they're decking their opponents and they win 1-0 in a 65-minute round. It's just not a good, it's not a fun environment. The person that loses has a terrible time doing it. The person that wins is there just to win. It's not like they're enjoying stalling, you know? So it's just not good.
Yeah, and I think that's it touches on something that I think has always been a very accurate um, phrase in the game design space, which is find the fun. And I first heard that from Gabe Barrett after listening to his podcast. But it's find the fun. So as a designer, you're trying to make sure the players are only finding the fun. Only not able to kind of make this game, like you said, this grind, this long drawn out thing where it's like, yeah, you might have won, but why? If you're not having fun, but why? Yeah.
Exactly.
So, obviously a lot of that kind of comes into the complexity of the game and what you're doing. Um, so, and I know a lot of that complexity does come into play with combat mechanics, especially when it comes to card abilities. So, you have games that just have one number. You have games that have the attack, defense. You have games that have five stats on one card.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, I don't think I've seen a game that doesn't have some kind of card ability that affects combat. So, can you go into a little bit of that about how to design abilities? How much is too much? What kind of things should you look out for? Things like that. You have the Magic system where it's like a keyword versus the Yu-Gi-Oh system where you have a whole novel on a card.
Go design your game like Yu-Gi-Oh. We could start with that. Don't go down the Yu-Gi-Oh path. You're not Yu-Gi-Oh, and if you try to make a game that's that complex, no one will play it. So that's a good tip. But I would say I definitely prefer to have two numbers, attack and defense. That's just classic. Having one number is fine. It just is very limiting. Like that just means that all cards are equally good at attacking and blocking. So that's fine. But in my game, I wanted there to be range, like how in you want music to be very dynamic and have highs and lows, you want your cards to be that way as well, or else it'll be very flatline and stale. So if I have a handful of cards and I have a 1, 2, and a 3 drop and they have 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 power, that is very boring. And like that is not interesting to me at all. And that really gives you no room for design and deck building. Like when you want to build a cool deck, you're like, I want to build a deck that's really good at blocking until I get to this win condition. Okay, you don't really have that option because everything's just the same. It's just very bland, and it leaves you no room to tune the card. So in our game, you'll probably notice that the stats are very high for their cost. So a 1-drop, say for example, Tocho, the legend, he's a 4/4, and people look at that and go, a 4/4, that's a 1, that's insane. But they're not realizing is that our attack and defense numbers are basically a multiple of 3 for Magic the Gathering. Whereas they would have a 1/1 or maybe a 2/1 vanilla 1-drop or like a 2/2 with some downside. Like, to be fair, 1-drops have gotten out of control in Magic, but there's a limit to the stats. You really can't have anything that much crazier than that. And in our game, we wanted to make those numbers a bit higher, literally just to be able to tune them more precisely in designing them. So when we design cards, we have more room because instead of at 2 having 4 to divide between power and toughness, or in our case, attack and defense, we have more like 12. Then we can make it a 4/8. We can make it a 5/7. We can make it a 7/5. Like there's a lot of directions you can go with it. And it just allows you to more finely tune the cards. And if we find that a card has a really powerful ability, say like a ridiculously powerful ability at 3, it'll probably be statted like a 1-drop. And that way it can still interact with 1s and some 2s, but it's not just completely OP. And in Magic and like other games, a lot of the time the design is like very restricted because they made the numbers so low and you can't do halves. So it's not like you can do a 1.52, you know what I mean? So you really have to choose a solid number. When you make those numbers higher, I mean, it's pretty simple. It just gives you more room to tune the card. So
right, more design space and things like that. And so with those higher numbers and with more play with the attack and defense stats, do you think that kind of adds to the importance of a card having an ability, or do you think that cards like vanilla cards that maybe don't have any abilities or anything like that, become more viable in that instance? Like, where do abilities stand with this kind of system where you have more range to play with?
It's actually set up perfectly for it, because when you put an ability on a card, if it's a little underwhelming, you can overstat the card slightly by adding 1 instead of having to add, like if you're at a 2 drop in Magic and it's a 2/2, you can't really make it a 3/2 with an ability, because then it gets a little bit too powerful. But if it was, say in our game, say if it was a 5/5, you could make it a 6/5, no problem. So for us, we don't have any vanilla citizens in our first set. Like we just didn't really have a good reason to. Like every card should have some ability and some level of interaction with the island or your hand or whatever it may be. Why not? I mean, like there's really, the only excuse I could find for a vanilla would be if you increase your set size to a level that your R&D team can't keep up with, and you do that so that you can have more options for collectors or to have a better draft experience that's more varied, or whatever your reasoning is, to just have that shiny big number say that you have a bigger set size if that's your thing. That would be the only real reason I could see for doing a vanilla. Like maybe one day my designers, because I have 2 full-time designers, maybe one day they'll just want to do a monster vanilla beater. Okay, that's fair. Like I'm pretty willing to do that. But for now, like every card has an ability. Because why not? I mean, that's what makes it fun and interesting, is the text on the card. Not too much though. You won't go full Yu-Gi-Oh! And then
Let's not get crazy.
and then you need a jeweler's loop to read your card. That's not an enjoyable gameplay experience. But we have some cards that have quite a bit of text on them. We definitely are trying to limit it. We don't want it to be anything crazy. Like if you have to read a bunch of sentences and then try to like structure it in your brain how that card functions, that's kind of anti-fun. So you want your abilities to be impactful and interesting, but not overpowered. And having the higher numbers and the higher stats allows you to tune the cards more finely. So like if you have a 3 drop with an insane ability, like I said earlier, you could just stat it like a 1 drop, test, and go from there. Maybe it's too weak. Maybe you need to up the stats, whatever it is, but you really got to test these cards. Like that is the main thing, is like you have to have a team. We have 2 right now, and we use certain members from the community, like members that are active in the tournament scene and stuff, to help us design cards. But now we're running into an issue where we're going to have another set coming out in a new release. So it's going to be one of those things where like they're not going to be able to play in competitive tournaments for X amount of time because they were directly involved in the design process. And like that's a whole nother thing. But when you're a smaller company and you don't have massive funding, you're not really able to afford a huge team for R&D. Also, as the owner, you should be involved in that. Like the way we work the process for our new set, Wicked Prophecy, is the guys came up with the design of the cards. They work directly with the lore team to make sure that they're flavorful and that the design makes sense with the actual character and the storyline. And then from there, they've just been testing them. Like they do it all in Tabletop Simulator. They both work remote, and they've just been building decks, jamming games, hundreds and hundreds, probably now thousands of games. And now that they're starting to get it to a place where they're feeling like it's starting to be more dialed in, I'll hop in, I'll start building decks, I'll come at it from my perspective, and we'll start to tune it up. But I will be very directly involved in the process of balancing and tuning this final set. So that's another thing, is like if you're running this as the CEO of your game and you're actually not super familiar with like the design of the game or the mechanics of the game, it doesn't benefit you to pretend that you are. You know what I mean? Like if you are just like the CEO, you know how to play a game, you have a lot of fun, and you're like, you know what, but I'm not a top tier game designer. I'm not a top tier play tester. That's why I have a team of people helping me with that. Like, of course you need to know how to play your game, but beyond that, you don't have to necessarily be an expert play tester, game designer. You just have to be honest about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have to care.
Yeah.
You have to view it as something that you want to stand the test of time and to get better and to get bigger, and not just, kind of shrug your shoulders if and when it fizzles out. And I think that's a very interesting perspective. You talking about, you mentioned hundreds and thousands of games that these designers are playing, and the fact that your range of your attack and defense stats are much more broad than your typical game. So you are able to make these incremental changes. I know you prefer to do just the attack and defense type stats, but with that range, do you think that also relates to maybe a card having a third stat of some sort, where you can tweak things even more? Do you think that kind of plays into the same thing where it makes things easier to balance? Or do you think that maybe adds a layer of complexity that makes things harder to balance?
It's funny that you said it exactly the way I was going to say it. That, in my opinion, adds an unneeded layer of complexity. That is not necessary, in my opinion. I wouldn't design a game that way because I don't want to play a game that's designed that way. That's how I always come at it, is what would I want as a player? What would I want as a collector? That's how I design my game and my products. So I personally would not be interested in a game that has 3 stats. Games are hard enough to pick up for people that don't pick up a lot of games. Like, I learn every new game. You know what I mean? Like, I know how to play Akora. I know how to play MetaZoo. I know how to play all of the new games because I'm a gamer. I like to play new games. So if it's hard for me to learn your game, which I've come across recently, you've got a pretty serious problem. It's going to be very difficult for random people that don't play a lot of games to learn your game. So let's try to keep it simple where we can. Magic can get away with doing really complex, over the top stuff because everyone that's in Magic knows the rules and they can figure the cards out. So it's really not that big of a deal. And like, they're Magic, they're an absolute juggernaut. They're daddy, like they are the game, right? So they can get away with whatever the fuck they want. We can't. We're smaller games, we're smaller companies. We have to keep people engaged. And if you make things too complex, they're just not going to play. And that's just like natural human nature of like, I'm going to try something that's unfamiliar to me. It's already uncomfortable. And getting them to even try it is a huge accomplishment. And getting them to keep playing your game is, I'll tell you from my experience, and this is coming from like, I believe we have a very good game. It's very hard to get people to keep playing once they've played one time. It's just hard, man, because they've got a million options. And one of those options is Magic, which is Old Faithful. You know, like they're like, well, I have a Magic deck, so I guess I'll just go play Magic because like I don't really get this shit. So if they don't get your game, they're just never going to play it again.
Right. And there's also like the sunk cost, perspective of, yeah, I mean, I liked your game. I would even say it's better than this game I already play, but I've been playing this for X amount of years, or I've spent X amount of dollars on it. So I think I'll just keep grinding away at this.
And I get that perspective because that's how I am with Magic. Like, you know, I've got like 4 EDH decks that I keep tuned up and shiny, and like I've shelled out the money for dual lands over the years, and like all my stuff is tip top, and I'm not letting go of that. Like, I play Magic still, you know? I'm not obviously playing as much as I used to. I probably play like once a quarter now, but that is like, it's Old Faithful. And I totally get that. But I think that gamers have room for more than one game in their repertoire, but it's really like, it's probably only gonna be 2. It might be 3. I mean, you have those nuts that are like one of my designers, Ricky, he plays every game. I'm talking, he knows the rules of every game you could ever imagine. Like, when a new game comes out and I'm like, hey, I want to learn this, he's like, I got you. Like, I'm like, damn, I didn't know they had cards yet. He's like, I screenshotted them. I got this. So, like, he's been playing every game. He does not care, man. He's hardcore. So those people exist. And those are like the hardcore gamers. They just love games. They just love to learn new games. And like, I get that. One of my favorite things to do is like when we're at a con and I see a new game at a booth, try to make a swap with them or go get decks or whatever it is and say, hey, can I have a couple of your decks? Me and my guys want to learn to play your game. Or like, will you even meet us later at the bar and teach us your game? And, you know, I can kind of gauge like, is this game have a shot? Is it worth trying to learn? And, you know, most of them are fun. I mean, typically if a game makes it to a point where it's in print and they have art and everything's good to go, it's at least fun. It might not be the most balanced thing you've ever seen. It might not be the most like retail ready product you've ever seen, but they're at least fun typically.
Mm-hmm. And I think something interesting that I heard was, kind of on that note, is, you want your game to have cards that people love and hate. You don't want to have cards that everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, everything's even and balanced and this is very nice. You want those moments where someone plays a card and it's just like, oh, and they just get frustrated. Because you have people that are going to gravitate towards one play style over the other. And that's where the fun comes in. And that's where that natural human interaction comes in.
Well, we take it to the next level. We make the cards that are a pain in the ass in our game also have art that makes you hate them. So, like, an example is Flanagan, aka Flanny. He's the little redhead. He's got a bowl cut. He's got a rock in his hand, like he's gonna throw a rock at you, and you just look at him. I told the artist, literally make this kid look like you just want to wring his little neck, right? And he's just this annoying little and he's a 1-drop that's eager, and if you have 3 other humans, he gains sidestep. So when 11-year card is destroyed in our game, it has a cost, and it's always colorless, and it's 1 less than its normal cost. So when 1-drops are revealed as broken shields or 11-year cards, they are cast instantly for free. And it is awesome just to see people see Flanagan cast for free, and they're like, this piece of shit. Like, they can't stand him, but both players chuckle because it's a child. It's like, I'm like, dude, you just called a 6-year-old a piece of shit. Like, that's pretty messed up. And then there's the cards that are like Kushil, who's like this mystic citizen that's real badass beast looking, and the turn you play her, you can abolish her to nuke the whole field. And players that like to have a ton of things on the field are just like, dude, really? We're just gonna reset the board. But the player that loves to see the world burn is like, hey, I love it. So you definitely have to satisfy both sides. I get what you're saying for sure.
Yeah, and you mentioned the shield system and as what it's commonly referred to, but the 11-year cards, and one of those being broken and flipping them over and then kind of being a surprise. Um, what what was the primary driving force behind that decision, instead of your classic like life points, or I know not a lot of people do life decking, but just those other common tropes, to keep track of where players are at and who wins and who loses.
I just liked it from the balance perspective of like, if I'm attacking into you, I'm not rewarding myself for attacking into you. You're getting rewarded, so that there's some back and forth. Like, I want to see games as close as possible, as often as possible. So if I have 0-11 year cards, you have 0, and then I sneak in the win, that's a great game. No one can deny that that was a good close game. So the whole point and the whole idea of it was, first of all, interaction, and second of all, balance. So like, the cards can all be used. There's not one card in the game that, when revealed as an 11-year card, doesn't do something. So it can either be cast. We have one where it can be cycled, where you can just toss it and draw another card. And then the overlords would allow you to return a citizen of the same type from limbo to your hand in exchange for that card. So say it's turn 2 and you see that overlord and it's a 6-drop, you don't need it right now. You can cycle it and grab whatever died on turn 1, maybe a Flanagan. But the whole idea is that it's balanced and it's interactive and it's fun. So you always feel like you have a fighting chance. You don't feel like, all right, I'm just getting steamrolled, like this game's over. Like if you're playing, you know what I mean? Like in Magic, you're playing like red deck wins, and it's like, if they have first of all, if they play first, it's a huge deal. And then if they have a good turn 1 and 2, you just know you're going to lose. You're like, cool, I just got a bunch of fireballs thrown in my face and I just die. Like, that's not fun. So the whole idea with our game is that you at least have a chance. You never know what the 11-year card's going to be. You never know if it's going to be a card that can save you. Like, for example, in a tournament that we did in North Carolina, it was like a 32-player tournament, and the finals came down to a classic control, like a 4-color, like gnarly reanimator deck versus a classic human aggro deck. Just blue and white, streamlined, 40 cards. And the aggro player was winning the game, and they were 1-1. So it was a very close match there in game 3. And there was one card that could have been revealed as that 11-year card that would have saved the controller reanimator player's life. Is a card called Hecatomb that, when revealed as an 11-year card, is a 0-drop, and you can sack a citizen and replace it with something from Limbo that's that citizen's soul cost, or total soul cost, +2. So they were able to create another blocker, and in doing that, survive another turn, stabilize, and win the game. If it was anything but that exact card, because they weren't running 1-drops, they would have lost the game. So it was a cool, fun moment where he attacked him. He goes, hope it's not Hecatomb. And then sure as shit, Hecatomb. We were like, oh, dude. But that's the fun of it, right? So just a level of interaction, and just going back to our, like, the ethos of our game is that you don't need anything but the cards. Dice, tokens, mats, anything. So in using the cards to keep track of your life, that's really the only way to do that, unless you want to do like life decking like Harry Potter, and then no one will play because it sucks.
Yeah, it's that's the general consensus I've come across. It is interesting because I do look up examples of life decking to see if anybody's kind of solved it, and it is quite the puzzle,
It's tough.
for
Yeah,
sure.
I'm not into it. Trust me, I considered every option when we were doing this, but like, I knew I wanted to have something that I could take with me anywhere. And in doing that, you must keep track of life with cards. Um, and there's really only one good way to do it, in my opinion, which is like shields. Like, it's the opposite. Like, Pokemon does prize cards, which is different, of course, but like Duel Masters and Kaijudo after that did shield, but they did them in such a boring, lame way. It was not complex enough. It was not interesting enough, and the games died because of that. And a lot of people love those games, man. Duel Masters still exists in Japan. People play the shit out of Duel Masters in Japan. It's just in the US, they could not get English speaking players to give a shit about their systems. It was tough.
And it's interesting, the example of like Pokemon's prize cards, because I'd always thought, even before getting into game design and all that stuff, as a player, I was like, why is it that when they defeat mine, they're getting one of theirs? Like, it should represent like your Pokeballs, right? Like, okay, they defeated my monster, I have 5 left, or I have 4 left. And it's also giving you the advantage of maybe getting something that you really need. But it really ties into the steamroll aspect of, yeah, I beat your monster and I get a bonus. So balancing that, yeah, it is tough. So it's interesting to hear that the 11-year cards not only um, you know give a benefit to the player, whether it's short time or the flip effect, but just also that kind of random aspect of you don't know what's going to be underneath it, which I know a lot of people don't like, but there's a reason that you remember that story. So it makes for good stories, and people like stories. So I think that's what makes a fun game.
Well, and to anyone that would say they didn't like the RNG or random aspect of the 11-year card system, all of the cards in this game can function as resource cards, so you're never getting an absolute dead draw ever. So there's never going to be a card that you draw that can't do something. And like you make the choice of what to put in your deck prior to the game starting. When you build your deck, you have to do that with that design in mind. And one of the things like later in a game, a one drop may be less effective because it's understated compared to the rest of the field at this point. That's why it costs 0 off the 11-year row. If you luck into one turn 1 or 2, like that's just the name of the game and that's just how it goes. But I would think the biggest thing that I get from new players is like, wow, that just felt really smooth. Like they just play the game and they're like, that was just, I just was flowing, man. Like just, I do this, I do that. I know the goal. It's very simple. It's all right in front of me. I don't got to check. Oh, you had me at 19. I did take 2. Okay. Like that is one of the parts about Magic that's so frustrating, especially when you're playing with people like that cheat and do shady shit, because in our game it's very difficult to cheat, really. Like you would have to do like sleight of hand basically to be able to cheat in our game. And that's one aspect of it that I really like as well, is that it's just all right in front of you. I don't got to look or worry about anything else. I can zone in on the field, look at my hand, look at what you're doing, and that's all the information I need to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. And so with the focus, or with you wanting the focus to be on just the cards, no tokens, no need for game mats and things like that. Obviously, that lends the combat system to be like Magic, like more static in nature, to where everything that can be targeted, it can be targeted equally at any time. With the exception of cards that have certain abilities and things like that. So why would you say that that's a better combat system, in your opinion, to design on, as opposed to something that may be based on position? Because even there's some games, I think, like Legends of Runeterra, for instance, where they have it's the same kind of thing where you declare the attackers and they block and everything. But if a card is next to another card, then they can have like an adjacency bonus or support bonus, and things like that. Where do you draw the line in terms of positioning as far as combat goes?
I think it'd be okay to do something along those lines where it's proximity of a card that is relative to another card. But if it's based on a specific point on a grid or on a board, that is actually more like a board game. And for us, that wouldn't work because the whole idea of the design is that it only requires cards. So if I were to require a mat or a board, that's totally fine if you want to put that in your game. It just wouldn't work for us, because if I'm going out to, if I'm going downtown and I want to bring my Kryptik decks and we're drinking beers and playing Kryptik and having a good time, like the last thing I want to worry about is like unrolling a mat or doing something like that. So for us, for our game design, it just doesn't work. Like our game is kind of like, not to sound cheesy, but it's kind of like a lifestyle game where you could actually just like always have it with you. And it's like whenever you and your buddies want to play, it's just like, boom, good to go. So like going hard on that branding and being all in on that as a brand really didn't allow us to design that game that way. And also like I just don't really like that design, like personally from a player's perspective. It just adds another layer. There you go, another layer of complexity and having to know the position. And I would imagine that balancing that game is very difficult, knowing how many grids out need the bonus, knowing the proximity in which I can do damage. Like that would be really hard to balance, because it really just takes one player to be like, oh dude, this one has this specific ability when this happens, like literally it's the best card. I feel like it would be very difficult to balance that game. I've played games like that though. I've played I have not played Genesis yet, but I've watched people play Genesis and I know basically how to play. I've played Sorcery. I know how to play Sorcery. Um, and they're fun games. It's just for us, it just wouldn't work, you know. And feel free to design games like that if you'd like. It's just you're gonna have to really test the shit out of it for sure to just make sure that it all makes sense. And like there's other games too, like MetaZoo does it, where it's like if a card is touching a specific card, and like that's fine. I mean, it really is. But also in their game, you can put cards on your opponent's side. So you can put things like on your opponent's side of the board, which just gets a little weird with people like stealing cards and like shuffling your card into their shit on accident and then walking away. Like it can get weird. Like you typically don't want your stuff on their side unless it's in the first zone. So like in our game, you can take a card with detention. You can take control of a card, but it's on the island, which is the very top zone. So it's not like hidden behind their cards or their 11 year cards or mixed with anything. It cannot be mixed. It's right there, right in front of you. So position stuff is a bit odd. Like for me, from a game design perspective, I'm not into it whatsoever. If I want to do something like that, I would probably design a board game, which I'm interested in doing for sure. Just like expanding my horizons as a designer, and just like I think I can make a really kick-ass like branded Cryptic board game. I think we can make something really cool, but it would have to have really great design and not just be like another reason to have another product. Like when Magic did a board game, it was disaster. I mean, a lot of people don't even know what happened. And you could buy copies of it at like, what is it called? Like Sam Goody or whatever those places are in the mall. You could literally buy it for freaking $8 to $10. And it's like a $60 game. So, because it sucked. The game was terrible. So I don't know. That to me is more of a board game because like it literally has the word board in it. Like you need a board or like a grid or whatever to do it. So to have that be like a randomized booster product that then requires a board, it just adds something else you got to have in your bag with you, you know, which to most people's no big deal. Most people carry a backpack. They'll have plenty of play mats with them and all kinds of stuff. But for me, I don't carry that stuff around.
For sure. And I think a lot of people who prefer the simplicity, don't mind things like, keeping track of their life points on their phone, or maybe having to use like just normal dice to keep track of counters or something like that. But it definitely can get complicated. But that kind of brings up a question about, these layers of complexity in not only your game, but your combat system. You have the attack and defense. Is it, have you run into any examples, or did you play around with anything like this in your designs where you replaced one of those numbers with something else, or you replaced an aspect of combat with something else that didn't just add a layer, but just replaced one?
As far as like replacing a specific stat,
like a stat, or toying around with, um, you know, there, because you have the cost of the playing cards. When the 11-year cards get hit and you cast those, and that affects combat. It's kind of all interconnected. But did you have anything that was more or less a non-traditional stat or part of a card that kind of replaced something that otherwise would have been there in other games?
I don't think so. It's pretty straightforward, to be honest. There's nothing really too crazy in that regard. There are definitely cards that have like typical like lord effects, like all humans get +2/+2 and things of that nature. And those are things you just have to keep track of. Like even in Magic, technically you're not supposed to put dice or counters on cards that have like a static effect from a card like that, but people do. Like, oh yeah, like these guys all have +2/+2, and they put a 2 die on there, and it's like, okay, but to be clear, like that's not a counter. So in our game, we just avoid that completely, where we're just like, you just know the stats, you know what everything's getting, and it can get a little complicated, and that's where the really high level players shine, is they're able to keep track of all that and interact with their opponent in a way that's beneficial to them while being aware of the entire field. Not the all attack. Okay, well, I'll just block for free because my guy's way bigger, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize he was getting the buff from that guy. Normal play, like, oh yeah, totally fair. Then you can take the attack back, no big deal whatsoever. But if you're in the finals for a match with $5,000 in prizing, sorry, bud. Like it just is what it is. So I don't think so. We also have cards that like like Moxie is a 2-drop that doesn't allow anything total soul cost 2 or less to attack. So we have cards like stacks pieces, like cards that say you just can't do it, that massively affect combat. So I hope I answer your question. I think I get what you're saying. I don't have anything that comes to mind that's like goofy in that way, that like breaks the rules of the game essentially. Like,
Right. Yeah. It just, I think every game that has combat will have like an attack stat, but maybe instead of a defense stat, I don't know if you've seen any games use things like speed or or like a priority or things like that, but they
well,
don't.
speed's like first strike basically. Like speed would give your card first strike, which I think first strike's a fine mechanic. We don't have it in our game. I'm not saying like we'll never have something similar to it in our game. We likely will, but first strikes that's a tricky one. It can be very, very overpowered without it on accident. You know what I mean? It's just like, oh, he just trades with. You got to really look at every card in the card pool, because if there are certain key components of like competitive, like meta decks that have a defense stat that will die to this first striker, it could easily take over a meta. So like you just have to be very careful with stuff like that, and that's just testing and design. Like, is what it is. But no, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. I think the main takeaway with that is, yeah, let's, uh, try something out, play test it a lot, and, you keep it or you toss it out. But in terms of combat, in terms of just what would otherwise be called the combat battle phase, where you're doing arguably the most interaction with the other player or players of your game. Is there anything else that you ran into in your design that in trying to keep it as simple as possible, that maybe some words of advice for designers out there that maybe some headaches to avoid or things to keep in mind or to consider when fleshing these things out?
You have to have set phases, and even in our game there are sub phases within the combat phase, and you have to have a set way to establish priority. It can get very goofy very quickly, especially if you're using instant speed cards. So if you have combat tricks, or if you have something that would make something unblockable, you have to have a way that can fairly be played where both players are on the same page. You don't ever want a situation where it's like, oh, I attack, okay, I block. Well, like before you were block, like I was going to make him unblockable. It's like, yeah, well, you skipped a phase. You have to have that set in stone and in black and white in your rule book. That would be like my biggest tip, is like the rule book is so important. Like Q is our head of game design, and he spends a lot of time dialing in the rule book. And whenever a player brings up an issue or something that's confusing, we have a meeting about it like right away, because that's stuff that we just can't have. So make sure it's very clear in your rule book how combat works. Can I grab something real quick to show you? I've got some in our booster deck that details this stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
So in your starter products, like this is people you might not know, this is a booster deck. So this is a hybrid product between a starter deck and a booster pack. So there's 20 versions. It's randomized. You can see here we got the Mystics. You open it up, and you need to have this or a rule book in every one of your products. We have a foldable rule pamphlet in our booster boxes. Like, to me, it's so important to get the rules out there. And one of the first ones right here is a card that has all of the turn phases on it. Tells you exactly what the phases are and exactly what the sub phases are within those phases. So something like that is just extremely important. And then also something like this that shows people how to set up their cards. Just have a card like this. So now I have these 2 cards that I can carry around with me that literally teach me how to play Cryptic on 2 normal playing cards, right? And then of course there's like a normal 30 card deck that comes in there. But I would say that phasing is the most important part, because you have to have a set way to establish who gets to do what and when they get to do it, or else you literally can't run tournaments, because there's just no way to do it fairly. There's going to be way too much gray area in your rules, and it's going to be impossible to certify judges, because the judges don't even know what the hell is going on. So
that's awesome. I mean, I think that kind of plays into the simplicity of, the design of the game and everything like that. And so obviously that's what your combat mechanics have centered around. The simplicity of only needing your cards and only, having reference cards available, or those references to the rules in multiple different places. And to make it very clear cut, like what happens when, I think when a lot of people think of combat design, they think of, okay, how do I balance certain cards? But, the whole other half of the equation is, how do I explain the rules? Because you know the game, your designers know the game, but the player who's never played your game is not going to know your game. So you have to make sure that every nuance that a new person may think about is not only in the rules and in the right place in the rules, but makes sense. So, obviously to keep that in mind for designing your combat is, it may just be one phase, but like you said, sub phases or priority or anything like that needs to be taken into account. Any last thoughts on combat systems before we wrap up?
No, I just did want to show off the booster deck really quick and talk about it for just a second because this is a product that I came up with that I think is like the lifeblood of my game, and this is the reason why players are like getting so into this game because when I meet new players, I just give them one of these for free. It's a product that we can make relatively cheaply and retail, and it's $10. So you can pay $10 and have a fully functional randomized cryptic deck, and it's like the Harry Potter hat. It decides which faction you like for you, which is pretty cool. They're all randomized. So, like, for example, we'll go play today at Dark Side. I expect probably like 30 people to show up. They'll all get 2 free booster decks so that them and their friend can play. We'll go out somewhere after. I'm sure we'll go out somewhere on the strip or downtown, and we'll literally just be playing Cryptic. And this is all I need to bring. Throw that in my pocket. I can play Cryptic all night. And there's no chase cards or foils or anything inside of these. And they're all very similar to like playing card, like poker deck stock. They're made by Shuffled Ink in the US, and they make poker decks. So they're ready to go. They're really beautiful and vibrant, but we're not necessarily worried if they get a little water on them or if they get a little dinged up or whatever. So you don't got to sleeve them. You just shuffle up and play Cryptic. It's pretty sweet.
Well, speaking of Cryptic, do you kind of want to go into some of the stuff that you guys have going on other than, the booster decks and things like that? I know that you're preparing for another wave of printing at the moment.
Yeah. So right now, if you want to get into playing, the best way to do it is go to play.kryptictcg.com. That'll route you to Keeps, which is the Cryptic Play Syndicate. Make an account. You can sign up for events there. It'll keep track of all your points. And then if you go to a tournament, that's actually the same app that you'll use to do pairings and results and all that stuff. So that's definitely the best way. And we're actually about to start doing webcam tournaments as well. My boy Freddie, he owns TCG Breakers. They're actually going to be running tournaments. It's not like for us, they're their own tournaments, but we're going to be providing prize support where you can play via Discord with a webcam, which I don't know if you've ever done that before, but I did it recently for the first time. It is awesome. Like you literally take your phone on a boom like this, and there's an adapter that goes HDMI from your phone to a monitor. You can see your opponent's field on the monitor right in front of you. Your phone is the microphone, it's the speaker, and it's your camera to show your field as well. So you can play Cryptic tournaments with paper cards on the internet. And we're going to have a way to do it that's organized and very easy for the player. If you have a cell phone, you can literally get everything you need to do this for $25. So it's super affordable to get into. Singles, if you need single cards, our boy Louie at Kitchen Table TCG, you've probably heard of his channel. Cavnamesmarket.com, he's doing single cards. So if you need single cards, hit him up. We also have a ton of singles on eBay every day that are being sold. So like getting cards is not a problem. It's relatively affordable. You can build tier 1 decks for probably $80 at this point, which is a great thing. That's definitely how we want to keep it. So if you want to get into playing, that's your best way to do it. As far as retail releases go, we're doing Wave 2. The release date's March 31st. Pre-orders are already going on through Southern Hobby in the US and Prince in Canada. If your store is on the edge about carrying Cryptic, or if you're trying to convince them to carry Cryptic, tell them to hit up their rep. We have intro kits already at distribution that they'll send to them absolutely free. 2 play mats, 2 booster decks, how to play video on a USB, and a rule book. 100% free. They'll just throw it in with their next order. So if they want to get some hands on the cards, learn how to play, the play mats are actually really nice, high quality. So it's like a really cool free kit, and they can get it through their distribution rep. Literally no strings attached, totally free. So that's how I would do it. Like, if you really want your store to carry the game, the best way we've seen that people do is they're like, hey, pre-order a case through Southern Hobby. I personally will buy 3 boxes from you. If you want your store to carry it, the best way is to just put skin in the game. That's the best way I can explain it, right? And if you want to champion the game for your community, we have a judge test that'll be released in the next week. And that'll actually be tied in with the Keeps app. So your account will actually show that you're a judge. So you'll be able to officiate events and run events. So a lot of stuff going on in organized play. And the reason for Wave 2 is just to get a release out to the public, to stores, to give stores access to the game. Because right now, Kickstarter is just secondary market, which a store is not really trying to buy it at market price, because then there's no money for them to make. So that's pretty much it right now, man. Just going hard on play. That's my whole life right now, is getting people to play Cryptic. So
Yeah, and that's a huge component. Well, Tanner, I think we went through 8-10 questions and all kinds of stuff. And honestly, I forgot what we even talked about at the beginning of the episode. So, but it's just, it's a lot of really good information, especially from the perspective of a really simple, streamlined combat system, and seeing some of the in and outs of why you made those decisions. So if you're designing, your combat system for your game, starting from a simple place, cutting complexity, and then going from there, I think is probably best practice. But Tanner, just want to say thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time. And if anything to take from this episode, I think it's if you're getting stuck with something, if you have a design issue, just reach out. I know that the trading card game community is pretty open. The tabletop game design community is pretty open. You can't do this alone, I think, is a common theme that I always hear. So, take these tips, try what you can, and then whenever you get stuck, just reach out.
for sure. Thank you guys for having me. It was fun.
Of course. All right. Take it easy.
Later, man.
All right, that was Tanner McBride, creator of the Kryptik trading card game. If you want to know more about the game, you can visit KRYPTIC where you can also get involved through their Discord community and try the game for yourself through Tabletop Simulator. So we all know that combat is a huge part of many popular TCGs, and it can be hard to design good mechanics without valuable insight from those already doing it, but also learning from games that have come before. And that's where Category1Games.com comes in. They have a large selection of classic TCGs that you can buy, play, and learn the things that you like or dislike about that game's design. They have out-of-print games that pioneered many of the popular game mechanics you see today. So if you're interested, visit Category1Games.com. And if you want to keep up with what else we got going on at the Booster Pack Network, you can visit us at theboosterpacknetwork.com and also find us on social media at TBPN Content. If you have any topics you'd like covered on the show or would like to talk about anything TCG design related in general, you can email me at j@theboosterpacknetwork.com. All right. Thank you for joining me, and another big thank you to Tanner for his insight on combat mechanics and TCG design. I hope this helps you in your own designs, and I'll see you next time.